Hi! Today, we are going to try making crystals from this Dechlorinator. First, let's take a look inside. The contents are white crystalline granules, and they are relatively large, about 1 centimeter in size. The crystal shape is also pretty well formed. Honestly, with crystals this solid, it almost feels like there's no need to grow our own. But let's give it a shot and see what kind of crystals we can make. So, what is Dechlorinator made of? Chemically, the main ingredient is sodium thiosulfate pentahydrate. As the name suggests, Dechlorinator is used to neutralize chlorine-based disinfectants like hypochlorite ions found in tap water. These disinfectants are essential for keeping our water safe for human use, but they can be harmful to aquatic life like bacteria and fish. That's why when keeping fish or other aquatic organisms, tap water must be treated with sodium thiosulfate to remove the chlorine. Sodium thiosulfate works by reducing the hypochlorite ion, the active component in chlorine disinfectants, into harmless chloride ions, making the water safe for aquatic life. One thing to be very careful about is that sodium thiosulfate releases toxic gas when mixed with acid. So never mix it with acidic substances. Alright, with that in mind, let's jump into the experiment. First, let's measure out 80 grams of Dechlorinator into a beaker. Next, we'll drop in the magnetic stirrer and add 50 milliliters of water. As I mentioned earlier, sodium thiosulfate reacts with tap water, so this time I'm using purified water instead. Now, let's start using a magnetic stirrer to dissolve the Dechlorinator. I wasn't exactly sure about the solubility of sodium thiosulfate, so I wanted to test if it would fully dissolve in this amount of water. As it turns out, it dissolved completely. So, I transferred the solution to a larger container and added another 20 grams of sodium thiosulfate, but this time, it didn't fully dissolve. To move forward, I filtered the solution to remove the undissolved portion. Then, I added 5 more grams of sodium thiosulfate and heated it on a hot plate until everything dissolved. I let the solution cool to room temperature, then suspended a seed crystal tied to a fishing line inside to let it grow. Here's a time-lapse of the crystal growth process. Unfortunately, at some point, the crystal started growing into an irregular shape. It didn't work out, but let's take it out anyway. The transparency is low, and it's completely polycrystalline. Oh no! The crystal broke apart while I was wiping it. From this experiment, it's clear that if the growth rate is too fast, it won't form a proper single crystal. So this time, I'm going to try growing it slowly using the density diffusion method. Here's what it looks like after 3 weeks. Considering it was grown with the density diffusion method, it got pretty big in a relatively short time. No wonder the cooling method didn't work well. Now, let's take out the final crystal. Lift the entire basket. Cut the fishing line. And wipe the crystal clean with kitchen paper. And that's it, it's done. Here is the crystal we just took out. Compared to the first crystal we grew, this one is definitely more transparent. That said, when you compare it to other crystals we've grown before, the transparency is still not great, and you can clearly see some gross striations. Even using the density diffusion method, we still ended up with this result, which just goes to show how difficult it is to grow a perfectly clear sodium thiosulfate crystal. Considering that the store-bought version already had a well-formed crystalline structure, this was actually quite surprising. On the other hand, the shape of the crystal has improved quite a bit. As I showed earlier, the Dechlorinator crystals you can buy in stores tend to have a long, columnar shape. After recrystallization, though, the elongated parts have shortened significantly. This change in shape is probably due to differences in the growth conditions. By the way, sodium thiosulfate has a melting point of about 48 degrees Celsius, so it melts easily with a little heat. Let's try melting it in a hot water bath on a hot plate. And there we go, it's completely melted. This molten liquid undergoes supercooling. In other words, even when cooled down to room temperature, which is below its freezing point, it remains in liquid form instead of solidifying. However, if a seed crystal is added to the supercooled liquid, rapid crystallization will begin immediately. So, I've now let the molten sodium thiosulfate cool to room temperature. Let's drop in a single grain of Dechlorinator. Crystallization started immediately. By the way, this video is not sped up. Since the crystal is growing extremely fast, it looks almost like branches sprouting from the seed crystal. So this time, we made crystals from Dechlorinator. Did you enjoy it? Since the commercial product already had relatively large crystals, I thought it would be easy to grow big transparent ones. But that prediction was completely off. That said, the crystals we grew turned out to be clearer than the original granules, so at least that part was a success. Also, the fact that we could use supercooling to grow crystals rapidly at room temperature was pretty unique and interesting. If you don't keep aquatic animals, Dechlorinator might not be something you're familiar with, but I hope you still found this video enjoyable. That's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. Bye bye!